All right, so is there an epidemic of influencer unaliving or not? Because every time I open the news, there seems to be another one. My research says that maybe the rates are elevated, but this epidemic is kind of blown out of proportion by a sensationalist news media. And by sensationalist, I mean bloodthirsty. You know the news media. Hello, good people. I am Maya. My channel covers social psychology with an emphasis on group dynamics and disordered thinking. I try to take it as seriously as possible, but we are a very, very unserious species, so here we are. Welcome. I also have been covering our evolving relationships with AI because I guess humans weren't having enough trouble with regular intelligence. We had to go ahead and introduce artificial intelligence. So that's good. I'm glad we're here. Anyway, the great influencer unaliving epidemic. There seems to be a combination of a few factors here. Media coverage, that's very important. Social contagion and risky personalities that are contributing to this wave of news stories about influencer. Can't even say this anymore. You got to say unaliving. So why am I even discussing something so dark? Well, I went to People magazine to read a very sad news story, and I saw all the suggested stories below, and there were so many articles on different influencers dying young, just one after the other. And of course, this was related to the article I was reading, so I'm stuck in the algorithm here too. There's constant stories of influencers dying young. And of course, most influencers are young, so that's when they would die if they were going to, with the notable exception of Batty Winkle. R.I.P. Batty Winkle. Goals for when I'm 85. Anyway, keep this in mind. Most people are not going to look up the stats on the event, and they're not going to dig through them. They see increased articles and they assume that this event is happening at an increased rate. In journalism, remember journalism? Now, students are taught to group things in threes. This is a rule long before there was a trending page. It was a rule for the papers, the print papers. If one popular article came out about a topic, another paper could print a story with the same subject, just a little different event, and they could sell more papers. This was decades before the trending page. So just note that just because there are more articles about a trend does not mean that there are more instances of this trend. If you are unfamiliar with the news media, lucky you, particularly the tabloid news media. They love a tragedy. As editors used to say, and they still do, if it bleeds, it leads. Now, we'd love to flatter the public and say that this is the media's fault. The people are much better. If only someone provided us with positive news, we'd focus on that instead. Well, the multi-billion-dollar business of social media says that that's not true. No, the people are the problem, George Carlin. The tabloids are covering influencer deaths because that's what people want to read about. Now, that does not mean that influencers are necessarily dying at a higher rate than the general population, just that the media is more likely to report on it, and it gives the public the impression that there is an epidemic of influencer unalivings. To deaths. Can we say deaths? Are we all adults here? No, because we're in the algorithm. Now, there might be an increase, but you can't tell that from the news reports. All you can tell from the news reports is that the public wants blood. Now, why are people this nosy? Well, in my case of nosiness, it's self-preservation. If I see someone who's like 25, 30 years old and they have died, I want to know how so I can avoid that. Okay, so they died drunk at a street takeover. Easy to avoid that. But there are some things that you just can't avoid, like congenital heart defects, accidents, a bad flu. I'm sorry, there's just no avoiding that. And when that happens, it's both shocking and tragic. There's this debate online that I've seen only recently. Should people even ask how an influencer has died? Is that any of their business? I say that it is, because that's how journalists were trained up until about 10 years ago. Part of the story is why. Who? The influencer. What? Died. When? Monday. Where? In his home. Why and how? Now, all of a sudden, That's rude, but really that's basic journalism. So why else do people click on news of an influencer's death, even an influencer that they do not know? Morbid curiosity, of course. Why do we crane our necks to see an accident we're not involved in? Why do we watch these violent videos that we can't do anything about? It's morbid curiosity. Now, maybe some of us are more evolved and we understand that death comes for us all. So it's on us to stop and respectfully observe that moment. But for real, Faces of Death was not stopping to respectfully observe any moment. It takes a really mature person to say, I don't want to see that. I don't want that in my psyche. But I think it's in our nature to notice death because it is so serious and we want to avoid it, especially when it is more distant now. It's not like the plague where you could get sick by noticing it. But this morbid curiosity that infiltrates the media makes it hard to really answer the question, are more influencers actually dying? The media will report the news of an influencer's death if they have 50,000 followers, but they won't report when that same influencer has a baby or graduates from college. The reporting is so skewed for tragedy, for blood. Then there are fake reports of influencer deaths, like Cyrax, who supposedly faked his own death, but that may have been a troll. And there are a handful of others that I found as well. Is the casual viewer really going to sort through all of this news? They're going to try to sparse it. I don't think so. It's just too much work. Why would anyone fake their own death to begin with? Well, influencers are attention addicts, and I mean that with the utmost love and respect. They operate in the attention economy where the most outrageous thing floats to the top, like some other things that will not be named. The personality is attention seeking, and the format rewards the biggest attention seekers. Hell, the very business model demands attention seeking. Now, even still, despite all this, there are many influencer deaths that are unfortunately real. There's always one hater in the comments that's like, I never heard of him, or one less influencer to worry about, like they're lawyers or something. Now, these comments are coming from people who are working through their own demons. I think that's pretty obvious to people with emotional maturity when they see these comments. But unfortunately, the internet is not a place for the emotionally mature. So some people might take these comments seriously. Just know that anyone who says anything like that is just projecting because they have something within them and they want to spread it. We should ignore them, just like the people in their real lives do. But influencers are still attention addicts, and that's not a bad thing in this media environment that we're currently in. Also, I don't believe it's an absolute negative either. People tend to fall on a scale of needing attention, and it's not really for us to judge because we're all on that same scale. We're all on the same scale. Either they are extroverted and they want to connect with more people, or maybe they didn't get enough love as a child, or they need to gain it from strangers, or they actually just want to speak into the void and see who is speaking back to them, just like celebrities of old. Now, hopefully they don't listen to these negative commentators who are working through their own demons, because that could contribute as well. But yes, you ask, if they are attention addicts, wouldn't that make them more prone to dying young? You are actually correct. And why is this? Because they might perform stunts to get more attention, like taking a dangerous photo or hang gliding where they shouldn't be. Or my favorite story, a group that stopped on Everest to get photos for the gram and then died when the weather changed. Like, could you imagine? Your last words on earth are for the gram, and then you're floating above your body and you can't even kick yourself because you're a non-corporeal being and you don't have feet anymore. Not the way I want to go out. That's why I'm not messing with Everest, like literally ever. But also the problem with needing attention and external validation is that there is never going to be enough. This brings me to the possible mental health problem among influencers, and that is that there is never going to be enough attention. It's the same for famous celebrities too. There is a void that can never be filled with clicks and likes. And it's like when there are malnourished, obese people, okay? You'll never get the nutrition you need from junk food. The hunger just comes back with a vengeance. Please watch my video on Watiko, which is this mythical cannibalistic creature that only grows bigger as it eats, so it can never satisfy its hunger. That is fame. That is attention. Not to state the obvious, but I must. If you have a pit in your soul that can only be satisfied with likes, and likes aren't real things, that pit will never be filled. At some point, the influencer realizes this, and it may lead him or her to unalive themselves. And they can do this deliberately, or they can engage in risky behavior like casual sex or drug use. And there are many ways to unalive oneself that aren't flashy, that are slow, that are just self-destructive. And this is a known phenomenon that has been studied before we even had influencers. Fame causes higher instances of mortality than living a regular life. And this has been studied amongst musicians. This has been studied amongst musicians as well, who are known for that live fast and die young lifestyle. I'm putting this study on the screen now. I know many of you don't need a study to know this about rock stars, but here it is anyway, just to confirm your instincts. Now, the biggest danger to risky behavior is social contagion. Social contagion. And I've always believed that influencers are among the most easily influenced people. It's not the other way around. They're on top of the trends. Their careers depend on it. They're subject to audience capture. And I fear that their personality type is more likely to accept risky behavior as a possibility if they see it in others. So being open-minded doesn't always lead to better outcomes. Okay, sometimes it does, but sometimes people are just more open-minded to bad ideas. Now, on the flip side, influencers also influence followers. So I worry that young, impressionable people might think that these types of behaviors, from drug use to self-harm, and are options if they see other people doing it, if they see their parasocial relationships doing it. Social contagion is a known psychological phenomenon, and we see it in divorce, in depression, amongst friend groups. With parasocial relationships, I really fear we're going to see it amongst influencers and followers as well. Overall, social media is kind of like a feedback loop for idle hands. You have influencers who need attention, and you have followers with time to fill. And yes, there is good stuff out there, but honestly, these apps, they select for scandal, for tragedy, for sex, for conflict, because our attention selects for tragedy, scandal, sex, and conflict. And the content game is just one constant one-upsmanship. It's kind of like a wheel that we find ourselves on, and it's really not healthy. I am eternally grateful for the few thousand of emotionally mature people who rock with me, knowing that I don't do that, or I don't do stuff like that. Like, I can't even put into words how much this means to me, that there are people who keep tuning into my channel, much more than I thought would ever do that, considering what the game is. So I'd like to thank you from the bottom of my heart for that. RIP to all of the influencers who have lost their way. It's really not that serious. It's just jokes and videos. You can move on and do something else. It doesn't matter. Thank you, and I will see you next week.